Shalom Aleichem and welcome to Mochen Le'Ra Online Smicha. We'd like to give a short introduction to a halacha that the halacha itself says that this is not a quick fix. This is one of the few places that we find that the Shulchan Aruch says, let the expert deal with it. And I want to start it by quoting a din in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, Siman Tov Nun Beis, Seif Lamed. The Alter Rebbe says, "Lefi sherabu ma'od hadikdukim behilchos hagala," since there are many details on how to kasher. It's not a simple thing. It's not you can't just learn it once and you're an expert. The ein hakol bekim behem, and not everybody is fluent and expert and knows what he's doing. Lefichach roi v'nochein. Therefore, the most proper thing is shebal Torah Habaki behilchos hagala, only a Baal Torah, somebody who learned and he's a baki, he's well versed in the halachas of hagala, of kashering. Hu yigalas hakelim, he should do the kashering. Not as we do it today, that everybody becomes his own deyazager and everybody knows how to kasher and everybody does, and what they think they're doing is right. Let the expert deal with it. So we see two things. First of all, we see obviously that it's a very detailed halacha, and not everybody knows it, and therefore let the expert deal with it. At the same time, if it wouldn't be a very harsh halacha, if it wouldn't be something that the halacha is very concerned about, they wouldn't put such emphasis on this. So we also could derive from this that the kashering business, for whatever it's supposed to be doing, is a serious matter. And we want to make sure it gets done correct. So let's discuss the background of kashering. And as you're going to learn in the halachas, as I said before, you're not going to, in this 10-minute here, you're not going to get everything you need to understand what the kashering is all about, and how, especially, what you could kasher and how you kasher. We're just going to get the basic bird's eye view. You should get a basic understanding of what's going on. It all starts in a pasuk in Chumash Bamidbar, Perek Lamed Aleph, Psukim Chav Aleph through Chav Gimel. The Yidden just came back from a war against Midyan, and the Elazar HaKohen says to the soldiers who came back, Zois Chukas HaTorah Asher Tziva Hashem es Moshe. This is the laws of the Torah that Hashem commanded Moshe. You came back with a lot of goodies. That's fine. But before you start using the kלים, the spoils that you brought, aches hazav, ves hakesef, ves hanachoshes, ves habarzel, es habdil, ves haiferes, those are all different types of metal. If any keli made out of any of these metal, kol davar asher yavoy ba'esh, taviru ba'esh v'tar. Anything that was used, again, I'm not going to get into all the different opinions, how do you derive it from these words. But let's take the most common opinion. Anything that was used by fire, with fire, now it could be used directly on the fire, or it could be used through boiling water. But if fire was used for the goyim, when they used the keli, to get rid of it, or for a year to want to use it, ta'aviru be'esh. He has to put it through the fire to get rid of whatever the guy did. Now, the guy didn't do it to harm. The guy did to cook. But because we have an issue with the flavor, the goyish flavor, which is obviously not kosher, because we have that issue, we have to get rid of that taste. And to get rid of the taste, we know the rule of kiboiloi kach poiltoi. You got to use the exact same method of the taste of how it went in to take it out. Now there is a very fundamental question. In other words, the first time the Yidden were introduced with the mitzvah of kashering kelim is only over here, at the end of Chumash Bamidbar, where they had the war against Midyan. Guess what? This wasn't the first place where the Jews had wars. The Jews had wars even earlier. And why is this mitzvah mentioned only now? So the Rebbe says in Kutas Sichos on Parshas Matos Masai, the Rebbe says we find throughout the Torah that a lot of mitzvahs were only told to the Jews, even though it should have been mentioned in the Har Sinai, but a lot of mitzvahs came out later when the circumstance arose. The Das Kenim B'Balei says the war of Sichon and Og, which happened earlier, the reason why then they weren't told about kashering the Kelim is because that war against Sichon v'Og was a war that they fought besada, in the field, that it's, as it says in Chukas, Vayetze Lekras Yisrael Hamidbara. So because they fought the war in the desert, there was no spoils to come home with. So therefore, there was no shaila, what should be done, no instructions, what should be done with the spoils. But in Midian, they didn't fight out in the desert, they fought in the city. So when they emptied out the city and they destroyed the city, they were able to come back with spoils. So therefore, this question only came about now. However, others challenge what the Das Kenim says, because you're so sure that there weren't any Kelim because it wasn't the Sada. The Pasuk in Chumash Dvarim, Pasuk Perek Beis, Pasuk Lamed Hey, says V'shalal ha'arim asher lo chadnu, and the spoils that we conquered, we got. So it seems to be that they did come back with goodies. So there are other answers given to this. For example, Tosfos holds that only the clay midyan, but they came back with, were clay bishul, were utensils that were used for cooking. But when they came back with sichim v'amori, over there it doesn't say they came back with utensils. They came back with tchotchkes. Whatever, didn't come back with cooking utensils, came back with tchotchkes. Tchotchkes you don't have to kasher. The Ramban, however, says there is another reason why earlier until now it wasn't, the mitzvah of Hagala wasn't commanded. The Ramban says by Sichon v'Og, when they fought them, where did they fight them? They fought them to be able to get Eretz Yisrael. They are one of the nations that we have to conquer to get Eretz Yisrael. Midian is not one of the nations that take up space of our land. What's the difference? The difference is, the Gemara says a fascinating thing. The Gemara says in Masechta Chulin, Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, that when the Yidden are waging war of a Mechemes Mitzvah to conquer our land, all systems go. Whatever you need to get the job done is permitted. So much so, it says, Kadli the Chaziri, even old pork, dried pork, they're able to eat, because we got to get the job done. So if that's true, when you came back with spoils, whatever you came back, whatever taste was taken in, you could ignore because it's mutter. Well, however, Midian, because Midian is not part of the land that we have to conquer, now it's a shaila of non-kosher food, you got to kasher it. However, Tosfos al HaTorah asks on this Ramban, and he says, excuse me, conquering the land of Sichon v'Og was not yet considered kivush haaretz. At this point, when they were fighting Sichon v'Og, it wasn't fighting it to get the land. That's only when Yeshua fought them. So why the Ramban's answer that it was mutter back then is not necessarily correct. So he says other reasons, many other reasons are given for why only the kashering came up here. There is an interesting reason that the Noida B'Yehuda brings. The Noida B'Yehuda in the Sefer Or Chodosh, a Masechta Psachim, Daf Mem Dalid, the Or Chodosh brings from the Tzlach, from the Noida B'Yehuda, that the Gemara says like this. The Gemara in Tainus Daf Chaf Aleph says, Kishem sha'am d'chama Yeshua, just like we know the famous story, Shemesh begiving doim, that on Gimel Tammuz, Yeshua made the sun stop. Kach amda l'Moshe Rabbeinu b'mechemes Sichon v'Og. Guess what? Moshe Rabbeinu also had that story. When he fought Sichem v'oig, he also made the sun stop, and they were able to get the whole job done in one day because he held the sun. So says the Archadash. So if so, because they were fighting all day, when the Yidden fought all day, nobody had time to chapanash and start cooking. And not the Yidden, the Goyim during the fight couldn't cook. So because the Milchama took a whole day, at least 24 hours, if so, by the time the Yidden got to the house and got their Kelim, the Kelim were not Ben Yoimoy anymore. And because it wasn't Ben Yoimoy, it's noising tam lipgam, the taste coming out of there is not fresh. So therefore, those Kelim didn't need kashering. However, the Kelim that the Yidden found when they won Midyon, the Midyon war doesn't say it took 24 hours. It was, it was a chick-chack war. They got it done pretty quick. So it could be that the Kelim that they got were used today for non-kosher. After those Kelim had to be kashered. However, obviously, you know that this is a interesting answer, a nice chap, but just because all the army men are fighting and they have no time to cook up a meal, there are still their wives and the children are still at home that have to be fed. So others challenge this answer. All right, so we find that this is all based on the pasuk of Klei Midyon, that we know that you have to kasher the kelim. Now, what is really the reason why you have to kasher the kelim? I understand that the Torah doesn't want me to eat pork, or doesn't want me to eat whatever the Torah prohibits, but I'm not eating that. I'm only using a keli that a pork or whatever was used, it was cooked in there. So the answer is that we believe, and it's interesting, it's brought in Shilas Tshuvas Radvaz, Chele Gimel, Siman Tuf Mem Dalid, that he once did not a survey, he once did a test to prove this, that when you cook or you use a keli to prepare food and it's done with heat, he tested it. Some of that food that you cook will get absorbed into the walls of the pot. And because it does get into the walls of the pot, then the next time you heat up the pot, that taste is coming out. And if you're cooking now kosher food and the old food was non-kosher, the taste of that old food is coming out. And that's the reason why we have to kasher. So there's actually a discussion in Achrayim. Is the fact that we are kashering today exactly the same what happened back then? Because maybe in Midyon, we're slightly different. In Midyon, it was a question of getting goyish kelim, that goyim cooked pork, and you're transferring it into your rishus, so you got to get rid of. How about a mistake happened in our house and we did something non-kosher? Maybe it's not exactly what it was in Midyon. So this is a discussion in Achrayim. So it becomes a big machlokes. How serious is the concept of kashering? Because I told you, you're not dealing with a piece of pork, you're dealing with the taste of the pork that's in the keli. To get rid of that taste, or even if that taste comes out, is that as bad as eating pork? This goes into the discussion of tam ki'ikar. Tam ki'ikar meaning the taste of the isser. When the isser is not present, is it as strong as the ikar, the actual pork itself? Because we're making such fuss, you got rid of the taste, you're looking at it as if there's a piece of pork here. And that's the big machlok is a big discussion for itself, if that's prohibited in the Torah, or that's prohibited in Rabbanon. And obviously there's one basic difference is that we could see that a piece of pork at the end of the day doesn't become blemished. It takes longer time. And suddenly when it comes to kelim, we see that we have a rule. There's a big difference between a keli, which is a ben yoimoy, a keli which is within 24 hours of its being cooked, or after a ben yoimoy. Because if it's within 24 hours, we say, the taste is a problem. once it's after 24 hours, there's much more wiggle room. So much so that in Torah Temimah, on the pasuk of the Midyan, he asks, I don't get it. The Torah told us to kasher kelim from Midyan, and their kelim you could assume were eina b'yoyma, even though I said before that they must have brought back kelim today. Okay, let's be more realistic. If you're coming home with spoils, even if the war you fought today, they didn't use it for the last 24 hours. So if it's an eina b'yoyma, you don't even really have to kasher it. Only as a chumrah we kasher it because there is no more taste. So some say that they only kasher taka kelim that were used today. But it's kind of difficult to believe that it all took place in one day. And on top of that, the Radvaz asks, we have to assume that's because halacha says, stam kelim eina b'nei yoimam, unless you know for sure, you could assume it wasn't used the last 24 hours. So yet the Torah says kashering it. So we have a big issue here. How serious is it to kasher, especially a keli that wasn't used for 24 hours? And l'chayra, why kasher it? If you have an easier solution by just letting it sit and then the problem will go away by itself because it is an eina b'yoyma, why didn't the Torah just tell you to do that? Or why not do anything? And mid-rabbanon, we know that we don't, because the Chachamim are afraid that if we're going to allow you to use eina b'yoyma kelim, you're going to become too trigger happy and use even a ben yoyma, fine. But min ha-Torah, the Torah didn't have to tell you to kasher it if it's kli akum that weren't used for 24 hours. So the bottom line is, the halacha is that we paskin that you do have to kasher kelim, definitely kasher kelim that were used within the last 24 hours. And there's a separate problem that we come about, that kelim that were used for the last 24 hours, if you're kashering it within the 24 hours, you have an issue that the taste coming out is going to go out and come back in. You're never going to kasher it because it's still fresh. So you're going to learn in the halachas of Agalas Kelim, you preferably never kasher kelim that was used the last 24 hours. But here is the summary. So we are concerned of the taste. We definitely are concerned of the taste, and we have to get rid of the taste, whether it's ben yoimai or not ben yoimai. Now, how do you get rid of the taste? The rule is quite simple. Kiboiloi, whatever level of temperature it went in, that's how much you got to do to make it go out. So therefore, things that are used straight on the heat, like a spit, that if somebody had a shawarma machine or a spit that you put the meat straight on fire, the non-kosher meat, so there was nothing in between the two, then if you got to get rid of the taste, you got to get rid of the taste by putting it straight on the fire. There is no other way of getting the taste out. That's the highest level of heat. Now, I'm not going to go into the details exactly which one, how you do it, how high the temperature has to be. Again, as the details are but I'm just telling you, if it was done straight through heat, you got to take heat to take it out. When you burn it with fire, the common understanding is you're burning out the problem. You're not schlepping the problem, you're killing the problem. When you're doing the lower level of kashering, which is doing it in boiling water, over there, most of the opinions believe, over there, you're not killing the problem, you're not burning the problem, you're just drawing out the problem. And there's many differences. There are many differences, what the difference is if I'm killing the problem or I'm burning the problem or I'm just taking it out. So if it was done with fire, you got to take it out with fire. If the heat went in with water, you got to boil up water and put the keli in the water, and that will come out. Now, again, there's so many details here, you can't learn it in 5 minutes. What type of there are some kelim you can't even kasher because the taste doesn't go out completely. Some even say that even a metal keli, a tin keli, which you could kasher, it's not 1,000,000% sure all taste is coming out. Maybe some is left, but it's so insignificant that I don't have to be worried about it. But this is the gist. The gist is that you got to get rid of the bad taste that's there. So there's another halachic discussion here. So I'm doing the right thing. I get the bucky, or I do it myself. I learned the halachas. I'm going to kasher the keli. We know that by tvila, when you dunk the keli into the mikveh, you have to make a bracha because you're doing what the Torah says. By hagala, when you kasher, whatever method of kashering you're using, there is no bracha. And the question is, why don't you make a bracha when you kasher a keli? So here too, this is a lengthy discussion in Paiskim, and I'll just give you some of the answers which I mentioned. In the Issa V'Heter of Rabbeinu Yoiner, Klal Nun Ches Siman Kuf Dalid, he says, the reason why by Tevilas Kelim you do make a bracha, and Hagalas Kelim you do not make a bracha, because Tevila is a mitzvah saseh, a positive commandment. And Hagala is a mitzvah leisesa, a negative, getting rid of, not eating nevela, not eating chazer. Tvila is so I should be able to use this keli and elevate it into the Jewish domain. That's a positive commandment. The only reason I'm kashering a keli to get the taste out, so I shouldn't eat non-kosher. And therefore, on a negative commandment, we don't find making brachas. There is another answer given that says like this. By tvila, even if you're going to say that kashering might also be a positive commandment, but there's still a big difference. If you didn't toivel a keli and you used it for kosher food, the food doesn't become usher. So big deal. You'll eat the food and then you'll take it to the mikvah. I made a mistake. I didn't do it on time. I'll do it now. So there's always corrections. You could always get it done in a proper way. However, when you cooked in a keli, it wasn't kashered, then the food that was in the keli that was cooked becomes usher. So tvila, dunking the keli in the mikvah, you're not preventing any loss. You're not preventing any isser. It's strictly positive. It's a mitzvah saseh. However, by hagala, because the food that you cook in there, if you don't kasher, is garbage, becomes not kosher, so it's a positive thing to prevent the problem. That's why we don't make a bracha. Rabbeinu Manoach says a very simple answer. You know why you don't make a bracha on kashering kelim? You don't have to kasher. Don't use the keli. Go buy yourself another one. So we only make a bracha on items that it has to be done. There's ways around this. You don't have to do this, and therefore don't make a bracha. Rabbeinu Manoach gives another answer that the rule of when you make a bracha or not is like this. Any bracha, any mitzvah, where there's time periods when you're able to do it, when you're not able to do it, tzitzis, tefillin, sukkah, milah, then when the time comes, you make a bracha. But those mitzvahs that you do always, there is no set time when it to be done, like trusting, having amunah on Hashem, or fearing Hashem, bikkur cholim, tzedakah. There is never a time you're exempt from it. So therefore, you never make a bracha, right? It's the same thing over here, withholding the fact that you're not allowed to eat isser is something which is always. It's not only certain times you're not allowed to eat isser, because it's something that's forever and ever. You don't make a bracha when you do it. Now, the previous answer I gave, Rabbeinu Manoach said that because you have other ways how to get around it, and that is by buying new kelim. So the Tvuah Shor in Siman Beis Ois Gimel says, if that's why you don't make a bracha for Hagala, you shouldn't make a bracha for Tvila also, because don't use the Goyish keli. Buy yourself a new keli. You won't have to put it in the mikveh. And the difference he gives is like this. When you have a Goyish keli, and the question is, what is there any other way to cook food? Yes, go to Target, go anywhere, and go and buy yourself a new keli. But if you're telling me I got a keli from a goy and I have to put it into the mikveh, I don't really have a lot of choices, because the choices of what I can use without a mikveh is much, much, much less. Only Jewish made pots. A Jew made a pot and I buy it from him, I don't have to put in the mikveh. That's a much smaller window of opportunity, and therefore, perhaps the bracha for tevilah should be, and not necessarily a bracha on Agala.